Welcome to the Marketing Mindset Podcast, where we dive deep into the minds of marketing experts to uncover the secrets behind their success. In today's episode, we're joined by a true marketing expert, Jessie Healy, who is going to discuss how so many e-commerce brands fail to implement the core elements behind a great marketing system. The $20 million that Jessie has spent on her digital advertising career has helped her crack the code to creating profitable ads that convert. After years of running multi-million pound digital campaigns for the likes of Etsy, Future Publishing, and Trinity Mirror, Jessie got fed up with the status quo and set out to create her own anti-agency called Webtopia. Jessie, welcome to the show. Great to have you.
Yeah, great to be here.
So tell me a little bit about Webtopia. Like, who do you work with? And, more specifically, what do you consider an anti-agency to be?
Yeah, so before starting the agency, which is coming up, we'll be having our 5th birthday this year, I had worked primarily client side. So my role was in either e-commerce or consumer-facing brands. I was hiring and firing agencies. And I just saw this pattern over and over, which was you'd get a really great sales team, very senior people coming in and talking a great talk about what they were going to deliver. And then ultimately it would be a very junior team that would be delivering the project or the work, the campaigns. And ultimately what ended up happening was the strategy would sit with me, the client, and the agency would just end up being my hands, the button pushers. And I really wanted an agency that didn't follow that formula of, driving up their own profits by giving me the least kind of experienced staff possible to run the work. And so Webtopia is really different. We've hired a team of experts and we really focus on training and education for the team so that we can take off the hands of our clients that strategic work and actually give them the growth strategies they need to succeed. So we work mostly with brands that are sort of 7 figures or very late 6 figures per year, who are scaling up and wanting to scale up to 8 or 9 figures, and they generally have a fairly small marketing team, and they need an agency that's going to come to them with ideas, that's going to tell them what's going to work for them. And so that's what we do. We become an extension of their team, but we're really bringing exciting, strategic, forward-thinking ideas rather than just executing a plan that they've outlined for us. So that's the real difference. And we work with, purely e-commerce brands. So we're able to be experts at what we do because we're so deeply kind of knowledgeable about the D2C space, about what strategies are working. And, we're not just talking about, we run Facebook ads, paid social ads, I should say, Google ads and email marketing for our clients. And because we're doing it for a basket of e-commerce clients, we can really see what strategies are working and bring those ideas to our other clients and be really expert in our particular space.
Yeah, and I know this isn't our topic for today, but I see the same thing all the time. It seems like agencies more often than not are sales companies that have a service as a secondary, right? And they go focused on like high client headcount, and the quality of deliverables is normally pretty low. So I love to hear that Webtopia is focused on like being a true growth partner with businesses. So, yeah. So we're here talking about, e-commerce brands failing to implement core elements in a marketing system, right? And before we go, in depth on, the different pieces in the whole marketing system, let's just kind of look like from a 1,000-foot view, understanding of what the core elements of the marketing system are from your perspective.
Yeah, sure. So I think the big thing that many brands fail to implement and fail to realize is the importance of customer insight. So I think that's probably the single biggest mistake I see brands, even bigger brands, making. So starting with the customer insight, talking to, interview and surveying your customers or potential customers is absolutely key. And then once you've done that piece of research, and that's something, by the way, that's not a one and done thing. As you grow, you need to keep talking to your customers, as they change, as your products evolve, as your brand evolves. So that should be a regular part of your process. But then once you have some insights on your customers, ideally you want to break them down into core personas that you're going to hang your marketing messages to. And everything you're then doing in terms of your brand positioning, your coming up with your creative ideas should be mapped to the idea of like, which persona are we talking to and who are they as a person and what messages are going to resonate. And once you've got personas, then it's much easier then to identify the problems they have and how your product solves them. So that should always be key and clear to, any marketing campaign. You should understand the problems that you solve for your customer, and be really clear on that. And so I think if you have that foundation there of great customer insight and knowing who your brand is for, who your product is for, and how it helps your different customers, then you've got the foundations then to build your marketing on top of. And then, it's because it's not about just tactics and we're going to try this tactic that someone else tried. That tactic might work for their particular customer base or their product. So it's about having those core fundamentals in place, and then you layer on which channels you're going to work on, what strategies you're going to employ for each of those channels, how you're going to measure them, when you're going to bring each channel in. And we can talk about that a little bit later, about which channels and which marketing mix is right at each stage of the kind of brand life cycle. But that's the core fundamental, I think, that's super important.
Time and time again, if you see a brand fail, it's normally because they don't have that messaging nailed down, right? And, I've seen opportunities to do market research, audience research, comments, reviews, Reddit threads, like those are all great opportunities. But you're saying actually set up conversation, actually set up interviews or forums with your customers, right?
Yeah, and it's a great point about, looking at the reviews. If you're a brand new brand and you don't have any reviews of your own, you can look at reviews of products in your space or competitor products. You can see, what are people complaining about those products? That can give you good insight. But yeah, there's no substitute for talking to real people.
Do you find brands need to entice customers, give them a discount or free product, or let's just kind of dive a little bit into that process of actually getting in connection with some customers.
Yeah, so it depends on your brand and how much natural interaction you have with them. We work with a brand, it's a kids clothing rental company based out of California, and because their customers are interacting with them on a monthly basis when they pick their clothes or renew their subscription, or because the way they work is you can kind of change the clothes up throughout the month. So there's a lot of interaction naturally. So that's meant it's opened the door for them to be able to have those conversations very naturally with their customers anyway. But what the founder does is she opens up her calendar, I think it's once or twice a month, and sends that link around and just asks people to jump on a call with her. And she's had people jump on that are not customers yet, but that have then become customers after talking to her. But also she's gotten amazing insight from her customers that way. So that's an example of a brand that's already kind of got a really strong conversation going. But if you don't, there's plenty of ways. You can have surveys on your site, you can send emails to your list, and you can try different incentives. As a marketer, I would always say just test different incentives. It might be a voucher, it might be winning the chance to enter a competition, it might be a discount code, it might be just goodwill. I think I would start with just saying, we're a new brand, we're just getting started, we want to improve, please can you give us 10 or 20 minutes of your time to help us? And you'd be surprised, people that are passionate about your product often do want to talk to you, or even if they're maybe a little bit, there's things that they think should be better, they might be willing to talk to you. So you can try different approaches, but the key thing is you've got to try something to get people engaging with you and giving you that feedback.
You said something there that I want to kind of double down on, which is, you can get positive reviews and, we know what to do with those. Let's talk about that in our marketing, but you get negative feedback, right? Could be about your product, could be about the customer experience, something like that. I mean, outside of operational changes and, how do you use that for your marketing messaging?
The negative feedback, do you mean? Well, I guess if you're getting a lot of negative feedback that's showing a pattern, then that's probably a sign you need to either fix something to do with your customer service kind of process or system, or that there's an actual product problem and you need to refine the product. So the key thing there is to listen to what that feedback is and take action upon it. but the negative feedback that your competitors are getting is also really great. So like if you're a bed company, for instance, and other people are complaining about the fact that a particular bed is really difficult to put together once it arrives, then your marketing message could be around how easy it is to put your bed together. So really understanding what are those things that recur for customers as annoyances for other brands. But if it's recurring for you, then you need to make some changes.
Very true. And yeah, I love being able to, use the competitors' weak points in your marketing messaging. One thing I always talk about with the team is, if you don't address opportunities and if you don't address the negative that people are seeing in reviews, then they're going to go and do their own research and probably get lost somewhere on the internet and then, probably won't find their way back.
Exactly.
Honestly.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, people fear reviews, like the public facing reviews on their site. I've had early stage founders be quite scared about, opening that up. But even a bad review is an opportunity to show how well you respond and like the human side of your brand. And if you had 100% positive reviews, I think that would be more of a red flag for a customer. They would assume it was fake. So you want to fear those bad reviews coming through as well.
Yeah, and not to take us down too much of a rabbit hole here, but, one thing I've been noticing when I shop online, and I've talked with other people about this, so I'd love to hear your thoughts. This is specifically for clothing companies. If I'm looking at shoes, a shirt, pants, something like that on a website, on Amazon, on, a e-commerce website, I'm shopping in the review pictures. I'm not shopping on the actual product photography because it looks great there, but I want to know what it looks like in real life. Do you feel the same way? And have you seen that with clients at all?
Yeah, I think that's a huge trend. Like I do that with restaurants too. Like I love going into Google reviews and like looking at the food. Like, does it look like the kind of food I would want to eat? And when it's not being like professionally photographed. And I think that's a great insight. And I think that's also a reason why, what we call UGC, user generated content style advertising, is also performing really well at the moment. It has been for quite a few years, is because we're advertising now, majority to millennials, Gen Z, I mean, even the boomer generation, Gen X as well. They're much more cynical about advertising messages than people were, 10 or 20 years ago. They've been advertised to their whole life. They're smart and educated. They're questioning the messages that a brand puts out, but they're less likely to question something that comes from someone like them. So it's important to have like that diversity in your UGC as well. Like if you, make sure there's like different races, different ages, as if your product does serve different ages, but make sure that people can see themselves reflected. Normal people just like them are really loving this product. And I think that's how you shop is exactly how like the typical millennial or Gen Z shops nowadays. They're wanting to see, what does the world think of this brand, not just what does this brand think of itself.
And I mean, so before digital marketing, word of mouth was a huge opportunity in the B2B space. Referrals are huge, right? So I mean, I think UGC is in a sense like a mass market version of, word of mouth marketing, if you will.
Yeah. And it comes down to psychology too. So human beings, like we are wired to follow the pack, to want to belong and be part of a tribe. So if we see people that feel like part of our tribe reflected in the advertising or using the product, then we're going to feel like psychologically inclined to want to join that tribe and be part of it.
100%. So, we talked about where do we get started, which is, making sure you're listening to your customers, doing your audience research, and defining your messaging and your creative off that. I want to continue down this path. Like, let's say we're a hypothetical business, getting started, looking to scale with your agency. Where do we need to focus our attention at each stage of that journey? And let's just say, we're starting out. If we're a brand that's day one versus, $500,000, $600,000 a year in revenue, what are the primary channels or areas of growth that we need to be focusing on?
Yeah, so this is such a great question because I think the tendency of an early stage e-com startup or any startup really is to like try a bunch of different things and like get loads of channels going. They kind of think like the more channels I have going, the more chance of success I have. But I would say that's actually the wrong approach. And it's about having the right channels in the right order and picking the ones that are most likely to succeed first and really drilling down on them and nailing them, because you only have so many hours in a day and so much time and resource you can dedicate. And also at those early stages, your marketing budget is not going to be as high. So for instance, if you had, let's say, for example, you had $1,000 a month to spend on advertising, if you split that $1,000 into 2 channels, Facebook and Google, for instance, then you're not giving enough budget to each channel for it to be optimized. So having your budget more concentrated on like picking the best channel. So I would say for that stage, to answer your question, I'd say the most important channels you want to focus on. So you would ideally pick one organic social channel that you're really focusing on figuring out and learning and getting your brand some traction in. It's not to say that you wouldn't potentially maybe repost some of your content. Like if you've chosen Instagram Reels, you might repost that content into TikTok and just see if you get a bit of traction there. But the moment you try and split your focus and try and figure out the TikTok algorithm for your brand and the Instagram algorithm for your brand, you're going to really split your focus and your concentration. So really focusing on one organic channel, posting really consistently and getting that data feedback that's going to tell you what works for your brand and what works on that channel at that point in time. I would say it's essential to start working on email. Now, this might seem a little counterintuitive because your email list is going to be small at this stage, but certainly having a focus on email from the early stage is important. Setting up your core flows, so making sure that you have a welcome series, a post-purchase series, an abandoned cart series, and maybe like a win-back flow or a replenishment flow. Now, these flows won't be going out to a ton of people in the early stages, but the point is any traffic you're pointing at your site, any customers you are getting, you're giving them the best chance of repeat purchasing or purchasing for the first time by nurturing them in this way. And actually setting up those flows is probably a few days' work. And once you have them set up, in theory, there's a bit of optimization required, but in theory, they should make you money while you sleep. And then you want to, at this stage, start getting into sending regular campaign emails. You might start with one every 2 weeks in the initial stages, and then ramp up from there. I would say in this early stage, you would do one paid channel. So like I said, you don't want to dilute too much your traffic. Now, the 2 obvious ones to start with are Meta, which includes Facebook and Instagram, or Google. And the choice between those 2 really depends on your brand. 9 times out of 10, I'd say probably 60 or 70% of the time, if I was to choose one for a startup brand, I would generally choose Meta, like Facebook and Instagram. But it does depend. If you've got a product that there is a high demand, i.e. people are already searching actively for your product, and you've got something unique that you offer, your product is kind of a unique take on a mass market kind of a product, then search could actually be the best first channel for you to start on. But if your product is kind of new to the world, or it's a new way of doing things that people aren't going to wake up in the morning and know that they want, then paid social is the better channel to start on, because you have the opportunity to introduce the concept of your product. So I like to think of the choice between the 2 as like Google search is a bit like the yellow pages, where you're a business in the yellow pages, no one's going to look you up unless you have the yellow pages in the US. Do you know what I mean by that? Yeah. Or you did have back in the 80s. Yeah. So the yellow pages is like no use to anyone unless someone picks it up and looks inside it. But that person looking inside it has a lot of intention to like buy because they're looking for the thing. Whereas paid social is more like an infomercial. They're sitting there hanging out, and it does a really good job of persuading someone that they suddenly need this like exercise machine that they never thought they needed 10 minutes ago. So paid social is the modern version really of an infomercial. And search is the yellow pages. They both have their place, and they both drive sales, and they both drive business, but which one is best for you will depend on those factors. And then at this early stage, you want to really be focusing on getting reviews and getting user-generated content, so getting videos and that kind of thing about your brand. People would often say at this stage they want to focus on SEO as well. I would say it depends on your bandwidth. The thing about SEO is it does take 6 months to a year to bear fruit, but once it does, it's free traffic. So depending on your resource levels, this could be in this early stage, maybe hiring a technical SEO person to make sure you've got everything right on your site and that you've kind of, from a technical perspective, you're okay. And then it might be a case of starting to create some blog content, and that blog content can be reused in your socials. It can be reused in your email campaigns. So you can kind of make it work really hard for you. But investing early in SEO is also quite important. And then you're moving up to the next stage, so kind of 600K to 1.5 million in annual sales goal. So I would say at this point, you might start introducing a second organic channel where you're really doubling down and trying to figure out, how it works for your brand. You're probably doing the same amount of email. You might be introducing an extra campaign every week. So you're wanting to aim towards a point where you're at least emailing your list or the engaged portion of your list at least once a week. The reason for that is it's super important that you don't let your list go stale, because your deliverability will be very badly impacted if you aren't regularly engaging with your list. But you do need to be careful. Like, if people aren't engaging over a long time, don't keep emailing them. That will also impact your deliverability. So that's a little side note on that. At this stage, you might move up to adding another paid channel. So you've got some traction, you're starting to get some good data about what's working with your ads. Things are performing well, and you're optimizing and scaling that spend. And at this point, you might bring in a second paid channel. So it might be Google if, as I described, there's people searching for your product. At this stage, you as well would want to have your brand ads on Google, even if you're not significantly advertising on Google. Brand advertising is where you sponsor your own brand name keywords to make sure that people who have discovered your brand elsewhere can find their way back to your site. It's important because the way Google works is, like, if you don't sponsor your own brand terms, other people will, and that might not be by design because of the way the Google search algorithm works. If someone's searching for a product, searching for your brand, and there's other brands that sell similar products, Google will actually show their ads at the top of the search results, even though those brands might not have specified they want to advertise against your brand name, because of the way broad match works. So that's what I would be doing at that next kind of level up, that next stage. At this point too, you probably want to be investing more heavily in SEO and doing that groundwork towards that. So yeah, should I keep going up to the next level?
And I actually have a couple of questions, if that's okay with you. Just kind of want to drill in a little bit on, going back to the, day one to 600,000. So I know you were saying organic social, right? You have one channel going. We're also looking at paid social, right? One thing I've seen before is, sometimes, brands might look for a unicorn that does both or also does the email flow. Like, if they're not going with an agency, if they're going with somebody in-house, what's best? Do you try and find one marketer to do it all? Do you try and find freelancers that can do each? What do you think?
Yeah, it really depends. And it depends on how involved the founder wants to be. I guess how much cash they have in the bank to hire resources versus do stuff themselves. I think the most important thing, first and foremost, is the founder or the core founding team shouldn't be doing any jobs that can easily be done by someone else. So if you're picking and packing, and I see brands that are doing this kind of level of revenue still picking and packing themselves, which is just crazy to me. So make sure you're getting all that stuff off your plate. The customer service should come off your plate fairly soon as well, so that you're doing the most highly leveraged tasks in your business. And I really believe that in that early stage that the founder or founders should really be understanding these marketing channels before they outsource them. I think it's fine to use a freelancer. It's probably at this very early stage, 0 to 600K. I think an agency is probably not the best bet. It's going to either be a great agency and that great agencies charge their worth, and that's going to eat up too much of a chunk of your marketing budget, or it's going to be a not very good agency, and in which case you're better off doing it yourself. I actually am quite a firm believer in the early stages of having a kind of marketing intern or, grad marketer coming in and supporting the founder, because there is a lot to do. There's emails to write, there's systems to maintain, there's customer service to be done. So having someone who's a real doer, who can kind of execute stuff for you, who really cares about the business, is dedicated to you 40 hours a week, can, I think, really unlock things for founders. And that's probably going to cost you the same or less than having a good agency on board. And then you can employ experts to kind of help you figure out the channels. So there's great communities out there. I mean, I have a coaching program. I know there's Andrew Foxwell has a great one as well, where you can learn from people in the industry who kind of have done this for years about how you should implement these channels. So I think dedicating your time to really understanding marketing is going to be one of the most important levers in your success. So if you're trying to outsource that from day one, you're going to have problems, I think.
That transitions great into, you said one paid channel, right? And I've seen companies before, they have, $5,000-$6,000 a month, but they want to be running 3 paid channels. Like they want to be just going all out, right? And so Northbeam, the tracking tool, they're similar to Triple Whale. They sent out their weekly media buyer newsletter. If you're listening and you don't follow that, it's great. So you can see industry reports. They're saying February, out of all the brands they work with, 65% of budget was in Meta, 22% was in Google, 1.25% was in Microsoft, 1.8% in Pinterest, 3.5% in TikTok, and 2.41% in YouTube. So doubling down on Meta, right? And we were just talking about that the founder could look at learning the ad channel, or they could, have someone in-house doing it. Just being bluntly honest, Facebook ads are a lot easier now, at least from a media buying perspective, than they were in 2017, 2018, 2019, right? The media buying aspect, I believe platforms are working towards minimizing or eliminating the need for a media buyer. And they're doing that through Performance Max, through Advantage Plus, through these automations, right? The thing that is really, really impactful now, I'm going to say 80-90% of your performance on paid ads now, if we're talking about just the channel, not the website, is your creative and your messaging, right? And we started this talk, Jessie shared that you need to be focusing on having, customer insights to drive your messaging and creative. And UGC is a huge piece of that as well. So, I'm all over the place, Jessie, but any thoughts on just kind of giving some insights on, creative and messaging and maybe even UGC for the channel?
Absolutely. So, I could talk about creative all day long, but I think it's important that you really spend time thinking about it. That's the message, right? And actually, this is not a sales pitch for you or I. That's not the point of this, but there are agencies, I know yours does great stuff, who will do creative for you as a standalone service. So rather than having someone do the media buying and push the buttons, having a great agency who understands performance creative and can help you kind of come up with creative concepts that might be harder for you inside your own business to put your finger on. So not only having experts who understand performance creative really well, but also that can have that kind of slightly outsider perspective on what your brand message should be. Sometimes you can get really caught up when you're inside the business of not being able to figure out what you're all about. So that can be quite a good unlock, is to actually get some professionals to do some ad creative for you and then learn the basics of media buying. And I totally agree with you that the actual kind of technical or button pushing side of media buying has become a lot easier. Since iOS 14, we've really consolidated the approach to media buying. So you're not going to be having lots of ad sets running and having to look at lots of really detailed data in order to get the account to perform. It's about continually testing creative until you find winning creative that works. And so, yeah, that's where an outside professional could really kind of speed things up for you in those early stages.
Yeah, paid ads are about being a marketer again and not just a growth hacker, right? Yeah. And, sometimes it's hardest to tell your own story, right? I know that as a agency, it's hardest to market our own agency, right? So, it's good to have that outside perspective, like Jessie's saying, to help your business that way. And, we're looking, before we go on to the next level, to kind of summarize that one, you were saying one paid ad channel, one organic channel, getting your email flows, right? You have 3 levers to pull with marketing, essentially, right? Get more customers, have them pay more per purchase, and then increase the frequency that they purchase. I feel like a lot of brands, at least from my experience, forget about the back-end email, SMS marketing and focus mainly on new customer acquisition on channels. Do you ever see that? And, any thoughts on, just how important email and SMS is to drive lifetime value?
Yeah. So and that's a great point about SMS. I always kind of basket the two together, but you can run SMS through Klaviyo, which is the email platform we tend to recommend. But there are also SMS only platforms you can use. But yeah, so it's so important. So typically you should be seeing 30% of your revenue go through email in some shape or form. Now, that's not to say that 30% revenue would have come if you weren't running ads and if you weren't doing stuff to bring people into your funnel. You can't forget about the fact that you need to keep bringing new people into the funnel. But it surprises me how much brands can get obsessed with the kind of dopamine hit of the new customer that they're getting from Facebook ads and their ROAS, but actually neglect to think about how am I getting these people to repeat buy, because actually it's so expensive to acquire a customer now. The average return on ad spend in an ad account, like tracked, is around 2. So for most brands, if they're doing like a 50%, if they have a 50% margin or thereabouts, then they're just breaking even on that first purchase. So the only way you can, grow your profits is by getting people to buy again, getting them to tell their friends about it too as well, but getting them to buy again. So everything you do in that purchase journey should be about that. So the post-purchase email flows are really key for that. Building long-term customers.
Yeah, and as we go into the next phase, you were saying we start expanding to 2, maybe 3 paid channels. One question I have for you, and I know every case is different because there's different, brands that have different size audiences and, market they can hit. Before you start scaling to a new channel, how do you start to get a feeling that you're maybe hitting, capacity and spend at the current channel that you're working on?
Yeah, I mean, I wouldn't say necessarily that you have to wait till you've fully maxed out a channel before you move on to the next, but you want to get it into a place where it's giving you consistent KPIs and you're confident that it's delivering as it should, and that you've kind of mastered the kind of process for that particular channel. So the reason why I say that it's okay to bring a new channel in before you've maxed out, like say you're on Meta, you don't need to get to your maximum spend, which could be like $1 million a month, right? But you do need to get it consistent and have some benchmarks to compare against, because then you're going to add this other channel and you're going to compare the return on ad spend from that channel or the CPA on that channel and decide whether that channel is, going to be like viable and interesting to you or not, because you've got a benchmark to compare to. So I think that's the first thing, is like you're getting consistency, you're kind of, you're getting into a flow where you've mastered the channel, you're able to kind of scale it. But yeah, so I think it really depends on your kind of growth path and what your overall strategy is. Are you aiming for like profitability as soon as possible, or are you aiming for growth and, you'll have a big exit one day, but you'll, never be profitable in your business? There's different approaches, right? Like I think Amazon only just got profitable recently. So their whole like ethos was around customer growth. So you need to sit down and decide what your ultimate goal is. But yeah, we see as we expand into a channel, so I think initially once you hit a sweet spot, your ROAS actually goes up because you've kind of hit the kind of amount of data that the algorithm needs. And I would typically say that, between probably 5 and 10K spend, you might start to see that kind of extra data being of value to the account. And then that can kind of continue for a little while. Very much depends on the account, your conversion rates and all of that. And then, yeah, at a certain point of scale, you'll start to see like diseconomies of scale, I guess, where in order to get to the next level, you're going to have to give away some of your efficiency. So I think Fotwell actually put out in one of his emails, that's another newsletter that's worth subscribing to, which he put out like the expected ROAS at each spend level, and how like it was like super low when you're getting to like very high spend. The expected ROAS does get quite low. So, that's something for people that I think surprises people that are new to the game, is to understand that doesn't kick in for quite a while, but when it does kick in, that is, something you have to deal with. And I think the reason why that's okay for businesses is at a certain level of scale, they have a lot more organic traffic, they have a lot more repeat customers, they have traffic coming from social, from all of the other organic channels that they're running. So they're not as reliant on that paid channel being as potentially profitable right then and there. But the reason why that's confusing to people, I think, if, you think about like the mass market advertising paradigm of the 80s and 90s, a brand that was advertising a lot on TV, on radio, etc., would have economies of scale. They would be able to block out and buy more media space, and the more they got, the cheaper it would get. With paid advertising on digital channels, the more you're going to push out to a less and less kind of relevant audience, and also the more aggressive you're going to have to be to bid for those spots, the more you're going to pay for those eyeballs. So that's just the way that auction-based media systems work now.
And that's where on the back end, email and SMS helps, because then you can make sure you have that second, third, fourth time purchase to make up for that higher new customer acquisition cost. So, we're expanding channels. We got through up to 1.5 million. We're talking about going to 2 or 3 channels. When do we start looking at adding in some type of, third-party tracking outside of the platforms?
Yeah, I mean, this is down to the brand as well. Like, it's kind of a personal choice, but I would say, I mean, I don't know the pricing of Triple Whale. I know they put it up recently, didn't they? But I think, once you're adding in additional channels, running more than one channel, if you're running stuff outside of digital, you're doing PR, that kind of thing, that's the point at which you want to have a clear picture of what's actually driving the sales and, how that mix of channels are interacting with each other. So I'd say the sooner the better, really. As soon as you're adding additional channels, you're going to need to understand how they're interacting. And they're pretty simple, these tools. Something like Triple Whale doesn't take long to set up. The dashboard's very easy to interpret. They do make it very easy to kind of understand your marketing data.
Yeah. And, one other key question I really have, which you see this, content is king, at least I guess when you're a marketer and all you look at is LinkedIn for social media, you see content is king all the time. Not everybody can be as great at content as someone like Liquid Death is, right? Liquid Death Mountain Water. How do you suggest brands go about sourcing creative? Like, do they find someone in-house? Do they do an agency for that? What type of creative do they need to be going after? Give us the whole spiel.
Man, this is a big question, and it's something it's a real tough nut to crack. And I see different brands approaching it in different ways. Like bigger brands that are pretty hot on social media, often take the route of having an in-house kind of creative management team. So they might have a person who's kind of working on that full time, and they are sourcing their creators that they work with regularly. I think, a brand like that might have 10, even 20 creators that they are regularly using to create content for them for both ads and organic. So I think that ultimately that's what a brand wants to aim towards, is having these trusted creators who create the kind of content in a reliable way that they need for the UGC style creative. I'd probably advocate like sourcing and finding your own creators yourself, or like getting an agency to do that for you, rather than going across these there's lots of platforms and networks. But again, it just depends. Like, you can try them out and see which ones work best for you. A lot of agencies now will have a pool of creators that they work with to create user-generated content. And then when it comes to like production, so if you're doing like more of an elevated style shoot, we're using actors, videographers, that kind of thing, that's where you definitely want to get the professionals involved. And there's some great agencies that specialize in performance creative. I think that's key. Like, don't just get some videographer from, you meet down the pub. This needs to be someone who really understands performance creative, because it's a totally different ballgame to other types of video creative that a videographer might have created in the past.
Yeah, and I feel like a common misconception with paid social in specific is, let's just throw it up. Like, let's just, just put some ads out, right? And I saw a marketer on LinkedIn talking, and they said, if you buy a spot at the Super Bowl, it's $7 million just for the spot, just to have that. You're not just going to throw up an ad. Like, you're going to spend a couple $100,000 at least on the creative, right? Well, paid social should be no different in that you should focus priority and, put 5-10% of your marketing budget towards your actual creative production that you're doing. So.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. I mean, the point is actually, if you create great ads, they'll have much more longevity, because great ads that people love, like, will keep delivering on the platform. So actually your cost of production per impression will go down if your ad has that longevity. So if it's kind of, janky and not quite right and, half-assed, then the chances are it won't work that well on the platform. And it's a false economy. And you've also had to spend the ad money, right? So yeah, I totally agree. Like really thinking about your creative and deciding what elements you're testing, and then like using that data to feed back to make the next decision about what to test next is really important.
Love it. And Jessie, I appreciate, everything we've looked at today, the journey going through. I just have, 2 or 3 quick rapid fire questions for you here at the end. If you had to summarize everything we discussed into a marketing mindset, what mindset should marketers or business owners have to implement the core elements for a great marketing system?
Yeah, so this is such a great question because I see so many founders kind of stumble and maybe give up too soon because they feel like they've failed. And I think if you can embrace failure, as data, it's a data point that's going to give you information to tell you what to do next. So having that almost that digital marketing mindset applied to your business. So I'm testing this thing and I'm going to see if it works, and if it doesn't, then I've got data to know what to test next, rather than I tried ads for 2 weeks and they failed and therefore like my business is a failure. So I think having that ability to invest in the data, invest in the failure that is the price of the data, is what's going to set you apart. And it's the entrepreneurs that are willing to keep trying, keep testing, keep acting on the data they're finding that succeed, versus the ones that attach an emotion to the failure and then see it as like a reflection on themselves.
100%. And for anyone listening that is in the stage of figuring out what they'd like to do in the marketing industry, what role or roles would you say are going to have just the highest demand in the next 3 to 5 years?
Yeah, so definitely creative strategist. That is one we've been trying to fill a creative strategist role for quite a while. There's not like a lot of people who have who've already had that job title, but a creative strategist really in our industry is someone who probably works in an agency or for a brand, whose job it is to like analyze that customer data, come up with the ad concepts that they want to test, put together a testing plan, coordinate all of the production of that creative. This is in general how it would work, and then act upon that data to further iterate and continue to test. So this role is becoming, I think, much more prominent and will probably overtake the role of a traditional media buyer who is much more in the trenches with setting up ads and running tests and that kind of thing. So that's probably the biggest one that I would say is a huge opportunity area for people wanting to get into this industry.
Agreed. And a forewarning, next 3 to 5 years for any media buyers listening, I think that role is going to go in one of 3 directions, and you can be responsible to be proactive and, guide where you're going to go. You can move into a creative strategist role for that channel. You can move into a fractional CMO type role, like moving a step up, or you will probably by default move into a data analyst type reporting role across multiple channels, right? I could definitely see, creative strategists. I think a lot of people are going to be switching towards that in the next, 3 to 5 years. And, finding people that have psychology backgrounds, very important for that as well. And Jessie, tell us, where can listeners connect with you and Webtopia?
Yeah, sure. So I have a free newsletter that I put out every week that it would be worth signing up to. So you can find that on our homepage of www.webtopia.co. So I think down the bottom, you can sign up to the newsletter there. And then I'm really active on LinkedIn and increasingly on Twitter. So I'd love, I've got like a lot of followers on LinkedIn and not very many on Twitter. So choose where you want to follow me, wherever you hang out the most, but I'll be hanging out on both of those.
Love it. Go give her a follow. And Jessie, thanks for joining us today.
Awesome. Thanks for having me.
Everybody, that's a wrap for another episode of Marketing Mindset. We hope you enjoyed today's deep dive into the mindset behind establishing the core elements of a marketing system for a business. Jessie brought some incredible insights and strategies to the table, and we hope you feel inspired and ready to walk away and take action. Now, remember, if you don't leave this episode with something, a new insight, a new strategy that you can implement into your career or your business, we didn't do our job, frankly. And with that said, we love to celebrate wins. So if you have listened to an episode and you took something and put it into your business or your career and saw growth, maybe a promotion, maybe more sales, please send me a message on LinkedIn. I would love to help you celebrate that win. And don't forget to subscribe to Marketing Mindset and make sure to tune in for the next episode. Thank you.